Thus it is certain from the phenomena of earthquakes, submarine and inland volcanoes which exist in every part of the earth, from the frozen to the tropical regions, hot and boiling springs, fountains of mud and steam, lakes of burning sulfur, jets and blasts of destructive gases, and the choke and fire damps of our coal mines, that a few miles of only below the surface of the earth there exists a vast region of, these quotes were from Recreative Sciences, pages 257 to 260. Of the earth there exists a vast region of combustion, the intensity and power of which are indescribable, and cannot be compared with anything within the range of human experience. As the earth is an extended plain resting upon the waters of the great deep, it may fitly be compared to a large vessel or ship floating at anchor with her hold, or lower compartments beneath the water line filled with the burning materials, and from our knowledge of the nature and action of fire, it is difficult to understand in what way the combustion can be prevented from extending when it is known to be surrounded with highly inflammable substances. Wherever a fire is surrounded with heterogeneous materials, some highly combustible and others partially and indirectly combustible, it is not possible for it to remain continually in the same condition nor to diminish in extent and intensity. It must increase and extend itself. That the fire in the earth is so surrounded with inflammable materials is matter of certainty. The millions of tons of coals, peat, turf, mineral oils, rock tar, pitch, asphalt, bitumen, petroleum, mineral naphtha, and numerous other hydrocarbons which exist in various parts of the earth, and much of these far down below the surface, prove this condition to exist. The products of volcanic action, being chiefly carbon in combination with hydrogen and oxygen, prove also that these carbon compounds already exist in a state of combustion, and that as much immense quantities of the same fuel still exist, it is quite within the range of possibility that some of the lower strata of combustible matter may take fire and the action rapidly extend itself through the various and innumerable veins which ramify in every direction throughout the whole earth. Should such an action commence, knowing as we do that the rocks and minerals of the earth are but oxides of inflammable bases, and that the affinities to these bases are greatly weakened and almost suspended in the presence of highly heated carbon, we see clearly that such chemical action or fire would quickly extend and increase in intensity until the whole earth, with everything entering into this composition, would rapidly decompose, volatilize, and burst into one vast, indescribable, annihilating conflagration. End of section 11. Zetetic Astronomy Earth Not a Globe, section 12. Miscellaneous. Moon's phases. It's been shown that the moon is not a reflector of the sun's light, but is self-luminous. That the luminosity is confined to one half of its surface is sufficiently shown by the fact that, quote, new moon, the whole circle or outline of the moon is often distinctly visible, but the darker outline is less, or the circle is smaller than the segment which is illuminated. From this it is easily seen that the quote, unquote, new moon, or full moon, or gibbous moon, are but the different proportions of the illuminated surface which are presented to the observer on Earth. The moon's appearance, astronomers have indulged their imagination to such a degree that the moon has been considered to be a solid, opaque, spherical world having mountains and valleys, lakes and volcanoes, craters, and other conditions analogous to the surface of the Earth. So far has this fancy been carried that the whole visible disk has been mapped out, and special names given to its various peculiarities, as though they had been carefully observed and measured by a party of terrestrial ordnance surveyors. All this has been done in direct opposition to the fact that whoever looks, without previous bias, through a powerful telescope at the moon's surface will be puzzled to say what is really like or how to compare it with anything known. The comparison which may be made will depend greatly upon the state of mind of the observer. It is well known that persons looking at the rough bark of a tree or at the irregular lines or veins in certain kinds of marble and stone, or gazing at the red embers in a dull fire, will, according to the degree of activity of the imagination, be able to see different forms, even the outlines of animals and human faces. It is in this way that persons may fancy that the moon's surface is broken up into hills and valleys, and other arrangements such as are found on the earth. But anything really similar to the surface of our own world is anywhere visible upon the moon is altogether fallacious. This is admitted by some of those who have written upon the subject. Quote, some persons, when they look into a telescope for the first time, having heard that mountains are to be seen and discovering nothing but these previously described unmeaning figures, break off in disappointment, and have their faith in these things rather diminished than increased. I would advise, therefore, before the student takes even his first view of the moon through a telescope, to form as clear an idea as he can how mountains and valleys and caverns situated at such a distance ought to look, and by what marks they may be recognized. Let him seize, if possible, the most favorable periods about the time of the first quarter, and previously learn from drawings and explanations how to interpret everything he sees. End quote. Quote, whenever we exhibit celestial objects to inexperienced observers, it is usual to precede the view with good drawings of the objects, accompanied by an explanation of what each appearance exhibited in the telescope indicates. The novice is told that mountains and valleys can be seen in the moon by the aid of a telescope, but on looking he sees a confused mass of light and shade, and nothing which looks to him either like mountains or valleys. Had his attention been previously directed to a plain drawing of the moon, and each particular appearance interpreted to him, he would then have looked through the telescope with intelligence and satisfaction. End quote. These quotes coming from Mechanism of the Heavens by Denison Olmsted, LL.D., Professor of Natural Philosophy and Astronomy in Yale College, U.S. Also, Mitchell's Orbs of Heaven, page 232. Thus, it is admitted by those who teach that the moon is a spherical world, having hills and dales like the earth, can only see such things in imagination. Quote, nothing but unmeaning figures, end quote, are really visible, and, quote, the students break off in disappointment, and have their faith in such things rather diminished than increased, until they previously learned from drawings and explanations how to interpret everything seen. End quote. But who first made such drawings? Who first interpreted the, quote, unmeaning figures and the confused mass of light and shade? End quote. Who first declared them to indicate mountains and valleys, and ventured to make drawings and give explanations and interpretations for the purpose of biasing the minds and fixing or guiding the imaginations of subsequent observers? Whoever they were, they at least had given the reins to fancy, and afterwards took upon themselves to dogmatize and teach their crude and unwarranted imaginings to succeeding investigators. And this is the kind of evidence and reasoning which is obtruded in our seats of learning, and spread out in the numerous works which are published for the edification of society. The planet Neptune, for some years the advocates of the Earth's rotundity and of the Newtonian philosophy in general, were accustomed to refer with an air of pride and triumph to the discovery of a new planet which was called Neptune, as an undeniable evidence of the truth of their system or theory. The existence of this luminary was said to have been predicated from calculation only, and for a considerable period before it had been seen by the telescope. It was urged that, therefore, the system which would permit of such a discovery must therefore be true. But the whole matter subsequently proved to be unsatisfactory. That a proper conception may be formed of the actual value of the calculations and their supposed verification, the following account will be useful. In the year 1781, on March 13th, Uranus was discovered by Sir William Herschel, who was examining some small stars near the feet of Gemini, and he observed one of them to have sensible amount of diameter and less brightness than the others, and it was soon found to be a planet. It, however, had been seen before, first by Flamsteed on December 23rd, 1690, and between this time and 1781 it had been observed 16 times by Flamsteed, Bradley, Mayer, and Lemonnier. These astronomers had classed it as a star of the sixth magnitude. Between 1781 and 1820, it was, of course, very frequently observed, and it was hoped that at the latter time sufficient data existed to construct accurate tables of its motions. This task was undertaken by M. Bouvard, member de l'Académie des Sciences, but he met with unforeseen difficulties. It was found utterly impossible to construct tables which would represent the 17 ancient observations and at the same time the more numerous modern ones, and it was finally concluded that the ancient observations were erroneous, or that some strange and unknown action disturbed or had disturbed the planet. Consequently, Mr. Bouvard discarded entirely the old observations and used only those taken between 1781 and 1820. In constructing the tables of Uranus, for some years past it has been found that the tables thus constructed do not agree any better with modern observations than they do with the ancient observations. Consequently, it was evident that the planet was under the influence of some unknown cause. Several hypotheses have been suggested as to the nature of this cause. Some persons talked of a resisting medium, others of a great satellite which might accompany Uranus. Some even went so far as to suppose that the vast distance of Uranus from the Sun caused the law of gravitation to lose some of its force. Others thought that the rapid flight of a comet had disturbed the regular movements. Others thought of the existence of a planet beyond Uranus, whose disturbing force caused the anomalous motions of the planet. But no one did otherwise than follow the bent of his inclination, and did not support his assertion by any positive considerations. Quote, "Thus was the theory of Uranus surrounded with difficulties when M. Leverrier, an eminent French mathematician, undertook to investigate the irregularities in its motions. His first paper appeared on the 10th of November, 1845, and second on June 1st, 1846, published in the Compte Rendois. In his second paper, after a most elaborate and careful investigation, he proves the utter incompatibility of any of the preceding hypotheses to account for the planet's motions, except only that of the last one, viz., that of a new planet. He then successfully proves that this planet cannot be situated either between the Sun and Saturn, or between Saturn and Uranus, but that it must be beyond Uranus. And in this paper he asks the following questions. Quote, is it possible that the irregularities of Uranus can be owing to the action of a planet situated in the ecliptic at a distance of twice the mean distance of Uranus from the Sun? If so, where is it actually situated? What is its mass? What are the elements of the orbit it describes?" End quote. This was the problem he set himself to work upon, by means of solving the inverse problem of the perturbations. For instead of having to measure the action of a determined planet, he had to deduce the elements of the orbit of the disturbing planet and its place in the heavens from the recognized inequalities of Uranus. And this problem M. Leverrier has successfully solved. In his second paper, he deduces the place in the heavens, that the body must be at as 325 degrees of the heliocentric longitude. On the 31st August, he published his third paper. In this he has calculated that the period of the planet is 217 years, and that it moves in an orbit at the distance of more than 3,000 millions of miles from the Sun, that its mean longitude on January 1st, 1847 will be 318 degrees 17 minutes, its true longitude 326 degrees 32 minutes, and that the longitude of its perihelion will be 284 degrees 45 minutes, that it will appear to have a diameter of 3 1/4 seconds of arc as seen from the Earth, and that it is now about 5 degrees east of Delta Capricorni. Quote, "These remarkable calculations have pointed out a position which has very nearly proved to be the true one. On September 23rd, Dr. Gall at Berlin discovered a star of the 8th magnitude which has proved to be the planet. Its place at the time was 5 degrees from Delta Capricorni. It was found to have a disk of 3 seconds, as predicted, and its longitude at the time differs less than a degree from the longitude computed from the above elements. It is not possible for it to remain continually in the same condition, nor to diminish in extent and intensity. It must increase and extend itself. That the fire in the earth is so surrounded with inflammable materials is matter of certainty. The millions of tons of coals, peat, knowledge of the nature and action of fire, it is difficult to understand in what way the combustion can be prevented from extending when it is known to be surrounded with highly inflammable substances. Wherever a fire is surrounded with heterogeneous materials, some highly combustible and others partially and indirectly combustible, with anything within the range of human experience. As the earth is an extended plain resting upon the waters of the great deep, it may fitly be compared to a large vessel or ship floating at anchor with her hold, or lower compartments beneath the water line filled with the burning materials, and from our lamps of our coal mines, that a few miles of only below the surface of the earth there exists a vast region of, these quotes were from Recreative Sciences, pages 257 to 260. Of the earth there exists a vast region of combustion, the intensity and power of which are indescribable and cannot be compared. Thus it is certain from the phenomena of earthquakes, submarine and inland volcanoes which exist in every part of the earth, from the frozen to the tropical regions, hot and boiling springs, fountains of mud and steam, lakes of burning sulfur, jets and blasts of destructive gases, and the choke and fire